Hello everyone, I've had some questions about my last few videos, so this is just to explain and to help people to help Jehovah's Witnesses become free, because for Jehovah's Witnesses to become free of the idea that got them caught in the first place, they have to understand that the society is not God's organization. And in order to do this, they have to go back to the beginning and examine what it was that the society was teaching up to 1919, but with the correct interpretation of Matthew 24. Now, it's not necessary for one to prove that the teachings that they taught before 1919 were false, because the society already admits that some of their teachings were incorrect. Remember, they never used the word false. So Jehovah's Witnesses need to look at their pre-1919 teachings the same way that Jesus Christ would have looked at them, rather than the way that the governing body looks at them today. And you have to watch out for that Proverbs 4:18 scripture that says the light gets brighter and brighter, because of course they will bring that up. And what is important is, even if God progressively shows truth to the society, they first would have had to been picked by Jesus before that scripture would ever apply to them. Jehovah's Witnesses are instructed to teach Bible students of theirs about the organization as soon as possible. This includes the history of the Watchtower organization. Look at this quote from the November 1990 Kingdom Ministry. Bible students need to get acquainted with the organization of the one flock Jesus spoke about at John 10:16. They must appreciate that identifying themselves with Jehovah's organization is essential to their salvation. Therefore, we should start directing our Bible students to the organization as soon as a Bible study is established. So, in the process of trying to teach someone else that the Watchtower is God's organization, they might in turn teach themselves that it isn't. So that is one way we might be able to help a Jehovah's Witness, is on the sly, by asking for or requesting a Bible study with them. And we would want to ask their help understanding Watchtower history. And remember, the only thing that needs to be discussed is the history of the Watchtower Society in connection to that scripture at Matthew 24:45 through 47 about the appointment of the faithful slave. And the witness should be ready and willing to discuss their organization, because their 2004 Kingdom Ministry tells them this: when starting a conversation, you most likely will have a subject in mind. However, if the person indicates that some other issue is of pressing personal interest, do not hesitate to discuss that instead if you are able to do so, or offer to return with some helpful information. So remember to let the Jehovah's Witness be the teacher. And in doing so, they might be able to teach themselves about their own religion's history. And they'll actually find out the truth in the process of trying to teach someone else. So even though the Jehovah's Witness is the teacher, the student is able to direct the study to having a history study. And this way we can direct them to seeing the true history of the Watchtower organization. And there are several advantages to being the student. Just remember, we don't want to defend the society's history. You want them to discover it. So ask open-ended questions and let them do the research. And in doing so, this Watchtower history study, the witnesses won't even realize that it's a history study and not a Bible study, because they will be counting time, of course, and then that will prove to them whether the Watchtower Society is God's organization or not. Now remember, teaching Watchtower history is not easy for Jehovah's Witnesses. They are used to having Bible studies out of a book. And this book has been prepared for them. They study this book at the meetings, and they also have weekly sessions to help them be better teachers of the book. So they are not taught how to have a history study. And so they haven't studied the complete history of the Watchtower for themselves. And there's not really a program to help them with a history study. So most of the info that they will get will be from the Proclaimer's book and a newer book that came out in 2014. It's a simplified version of the Proclaimer's book. It's entitled God's Kingdom Rules. So they will be referring to these books. And the easiest way for them to teach about the society's history is to let people read the Proclaimer's book for themselves. And if you can get that book in your hand, then you will have tons of info that can be used. And once the bell has been rung, it cannot be unrung. It's possible that there's not a single witness who realizes that the first two presidents of the Watchtower Society never knew about Jesus returning in 1914. They both taught that he returned invisibly in 1874. The Jehovah's Witnesses are not aware of this. More than 95% of Jehovah's Witnesses today do not realize that Charles Taze Russell and Joseph Franklin Rutherford did not realize that Jesus returned invisibly in 1914. So that is something that Jehovah's Witnesses have never thought about or they've never read about. They are actually hearing someone else think about these things for them. Because remember, the society says that they were giving the proper food at the proper time. But if Jesus came in 1914 and they were teaching that he came in 1874, they weren't watching for Jesus because they thought he already came. And that was not the proper food at the proper time. If Jesus did return in 1914, neither Russell nor Rutherford knew anything about it. Also, in the scriptures it says they will be happy only if at Jesus' knocking they at once open to him. But if Jesus was knocking in 1914, he would have been knocking for 29 years, because they didn't realize he came in 1914 till Knorr's presidency in 1943. You could also bring up the fact of the faithful and discreet slave, that there wasn't a slave class teaching officially until the 1940s. So whenever the society speaks about the faithful and discreet slave class prior to the 1940s, we know it was a single person. It was Charles Taze Russell. You also can bring up the Millions Now Living Will Never Die. That was a lecture that was going on at that time, and it was premature and it was a false teaching. You could also bring up the Great Pyramid of Giza and how they got measurements from the pyramid, and how Russell came up with 1914 for the end of the world. He got that year from measuring the pyramid in Giza. There are even ex-Jehovah's Witnesses who don't know that. I have had some ex-Jehovah's Witnesses argue with me and tell me I was wrong about that, but that is a fact. So if even ex-Jehovah's Witnesses don't know, then current Jehovah's Witnesses certainly don't know. And every person is different, so it may take them a long time to realize this, and it may take them a short time. Some people, it takes them a few months. Some people, it takes years and years. But once that bell is rung, it can't be unrung. Once you learn the truth about the truth, you can't unlearn it. And eventually, cognitive dissonance will push out the illusion that this is God's organization. So if you can, maybe have a Bible study with a Jehovah's Witness, or even just speaking with them at the door, have them come back as a return visit and have conversations with them or something like that. You may be able to wake some of these people up. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you very much for watching. Bye, everyone.